Hello, I'm Trevor Shearston on a cold and wet afternoon in Katoomba. To my great relief, about 6 weeks ago, my novel The Beach Caves finally came out, and it's been a fairly long time in coming. Between first draft and publication, another 2 novels have intervened, so it's been a while. It's fairly difficult for me now to remember how it all began. Its beginnings are probably more obscure than I will make them in this short intro. I was interested in a professional married couple who were in the same, as I say, profession, and the tensions that might exist in that couple if their professional reputations and their power are not equal, if there's an imbalance. I was interested also in the consequences of a decision made by a young person in their 20s and the regrets and the consequences that they feel about that decision when they're in their 50s, a decision that has not gone away and that has had consequences all the way through into their middle years. And I was interested in archaeology, and I'm probably clearest on where that interest came from, particularly the interest in the archaeology of pre-invasion Aboriginal societies in this country. I lived in Papua New Guinea in the early 70s, and there were ANU archaeologists working at a site at Cook Swamp examining the beginnings of agriculture in the highlands, and I was fascinated by the heated discussions that they would often have with one another about very, very fine points of interpretation of the site. And then in the 80s, I lived on the south coast of New South Wales at Maruya, and on all those beaches and at the base of every headland, there was signs of Aboriginal occupation. There were middens, there were bones, and in some instances there were stone tools. All of that came together in the beach caves, and I'm not sure myself how they all came together, but somehow they managed to, and became a book in publishable, became a novel in publishable form. I'm going to read from the beginning, which is the most sensible place to start. What I'm trying to do is give you, the reader, a sense of how a site might be discovered and the excitement that might generate. My married couple are Annette Ray and Marilyn Herr. Professor Ray and his wife is Dr. Herr, so that's the imbalance. And Annette, who is mentioned at the very end of this little short reading, is an honours student who is her honours supervisor is the Professor Annette Ray. The Beach Caves. Ray began by pointing their eyes to the door. It wasn't closed to keep things out, he said. It was closed to keep things in. The site was unlike anything he or Dr. Herr, he nodded towards his wife, had ever stood at or found in the literature. You will shortly understand why, but please, I repeat, please keep to yourselves what I'm about to tell you. I did weigh up saying nothing, just letting you see when you got there. But on site you'll be my colleagues as well as my students. I'd prefer that I can trust you. So return that trust, yes? The room murmured yes. Thank you. Now, how many of you have driven to the coast from here? 3 hands rose. Is that all? He strode to the board and snatched up a stick of chalk, slashed 2 north-south wriggles, river and coast, made a cross on the coast and jotted BB, and inland another cross, C. He joined the 2 with a horizontal, then used the chalk as a pointer, left to right. Canberra, Clyde River, Bateman's Bay. The highway crosses the river here. He made and labelled a cross, N, at a village called Nelligan. The site's a mile upstream of the bridge. That made it sound like civilization, he went on, but it wasn't. The site was on the other side of the river in the state forest. Everything would have to be ferried across in dinghies, hence his stipulation of no non-swimmers. He'd arranged outboards and dinghies with a local boat shed. The camping would be rough, washing in the creek, a spade for a toilet. No days off, and once there, no leaving. He had use of a university Land Rover, but anyone with a car should bring it. Departing on the Saturday after autumn break began, 10 days from now. Which should be enough notice to cancel other plans and to find a sleeping bag. He flashed them a grin that didn't bear his teeth. Sleeping bags not, I see from your faces, uppermost in your minds, but the larger question, i.e., if this site has gone undiscovered for so long, why now the urgency? The best answer, he said, was to recount its discovery. Monday morning of last week, a call had been put through to him by Jan, the secretary, from a Mr. Hendy, who lived in Queanbeyan. On the Sunday, Mr. Hendy and a mate had been fishing for bream off the mouth of a creek flowing into the Clyde from the eastern state forest side. The mate was hit by a need perilous to perform from a dinghy, so they pulled to the bank. As they in the room would soon see, the bank at that particular point was unusual in being two flood terraces, one above the other and both old. There was no sign that they'd ever burned, but they were almost treeless, just native grasses and bracken and a scattering of casuarinas and spotted gum so stunted they looked like different species from those on the bank proper. The explanation was that under a skin of silt, the terraces were almost pure sand. There were other boats on the river, so the man with the call of nature waded up through the bracken to the higher terrace. While squatting, he spotted what he thought was the remains of a stone chimney. When he'd finished, he went to look, believing he'd found all that was left of some sad little settler's hut. But it wasn't a chimney. It was a dry stone circular wall, or rather 3/4 circle, largely intact, waist high, some 3 metres across, and heavily encrusted with lichen. Any guesses? An old well? One of the boys said. Yes, that was his next guess. But a well made no sense either. The diameter was too great, and 5 minutes away was a creek fresh above the tidal reach. Then he spotted a second circle. That was when he called to Mr. Hendy. They abandoned their fishing and went bracken bashing. All up, they found 17 of the circles in 3 clusters and a sandstone boulder with hatchet grinding grooves. Fortunately, Mr. Hendy had seen hatchet grooves before. He rang the university first thing on the Monday. I dropped everything, including your lecture, for which again I apologise, if not entirely sincerely, and drove over to Queanbeyan. He wasn't free to come with me till the Friday, so I got him to mark the creek on the map, and I drove down there that same afternoon. I went again with Dr. Herr on the weekend, and we did a little digging, which is why I'm describing the place to you in, I must admit, a state of some animation. The reason being, he beckoned urgently with both hands. Anyone? They're houses, someone behind Annette murmured. Precisely, having sat in one. Thank you. Stone houses in this land of the wandering nomad. The opening of the beach caves. And I'm Trevor Shearston. Thank you. Bye-bye.